Well, good evening everyone, and this video, well, it's going to be kind of a follow-up of the previous video I've made, in which I've talked about principalities and powers disarmed. Well, I'm going to use a bit of history to illustrate something to you. I'm going to use a small portion of classical history and another portion of medieval history. Well, I'm good at history. I also write historical novels, historical fiction, and I often enjoy researching historical events. So let's begin. First, I want to mention this, which is the capital of the United Kingdom. It has the center of the metropolis is called City of London or City-State of London, and it's not a part of the United Kingdom nor of England. It's basically a sovereign state within the UK, just like Washington DC is a sovereign state within the United States. It's not part of the Union nor a part of the other 50 states. Just like the Vatican State is also a separate city-state. And this small city-state over here is the same size of the ancient city Londinium, which was the administrative provincial capital of Roman Britain. And basically the rest of the city of London and later the metropolis of London is built around the ancient administrative center. And during the Roman era, it began with 20,000 inhabitants and it grew up to 60,000. For ancient times, it was one of the largest cities on the earth. Anyway, I just wanted to begin with that. Just so you guys will know that there is a London that's not part of the UK. But okay, this is the Principate or the Roman Empire in the year 125. And well, within, let me just do an explanation for you. These pink colors reveal provinces. These were lands and regions that were directly governed by the Senate of Rome. Those were representatives from these regions that traveled all the way to Rome, and they discussed basically politics, economic developments, and also, the military strategies. And the whole idea was that senatorial provinces where most of the people were fully Romanized and they felt up the Roman rules. The imperials were regions where those nations and those ethnicities were a bit hostile to, yet they were adapted to the Roman way of life. Nevertheless, they were a risk. So these purple regions were governed by the emperor, and he did this through client kings in these regions. For example, Noricum, today this region is called Austria. Noricum was governed by a Celtic king, and in each region you had a small prince, a small royal family, which was subjected to the Noric king. And above him you had a Roman governor who only managed the administration for the emperor. Well, we had several client kings over here, and the same you had in many other places like in Thracia, in Dacia. And you also had full client provinces. These were provinces that were completely governed by their local kings, yet those local kings were Roman citizens. Armenia was one of them, and this map is not completely correct because the Mesopotamia, this region was also a full client province, and this whole region over here, which was called Greater Germany, was also divided in client provinces, the same as ancient Ireland and ancient Scotland. So the Roman world, I mean the purple and the pink regions together that you see here, comprise maybe around 60 million inhabitants, and together with everything around it, it probably had maybe around roughly 100 million people in its sphere of influence. So that was the principality in this time. And what you see here, these yellow dots here are legionary camps. And a legionary camp was basically a small village, and that village was the administrative center of the military. And each legionary camp had around 10,000 soldiers and probably 2,000 or 3,000 or slaves. So around 10,000 till maybe 13,000 military personnel in each of these places. So together for Britain, you had around 30 to 40,000 troops to police this region. And well, I'm not going to count all of them, but they had, because you need to understand the following. To maintain a large region like this, they had no airplanes, Wi-Fi like we have today, so they had no internet, no telegraph, they had no trains either. So for example, to travel from Rome to Noricum over here, this might take about 3 days with a horse. Okay, all the way here to what we today call the Baltic Sea. Oh, sorry, this went wrong. Let me go back. To go from here to here probably would take about 8 days, probably, with the fastest horse on the Celtic and Roman roads. To go from here all the way to the top of Scotland, let me see, 5 days to here, then another 4 days all the way to the top. That would be about 9 days. And you also had Iceland, which was called Thule or Tilia. That was 6 days sailing. So, and Iceland was economically dependent upon the British Isles. So because because Britain was under Roman rule, Thule or Iceland was also basically a distant colony of Rome without being literally subjected to Rome. So from here all the way to Iceland was around 16 days, a half month. Nevertheless, you understand the issue here. To go from Olisipo, which today is Lisbon, all the way to present-day Kuwait, it would take around 15 days also, with the fastest chariots all the way through Europe and what today call the Middle East. Normally it will take about a month. So it's a large region. So in order for this region to be united, you needed to have people needed to feel safe. Okay, and how are you going to make people feel safe? I mean, if you're living, I want you to use your imagination. Let's say you were in the Netherlands at the time. Okay, you lived over here. This was a swamp region. There are 2 military camps over here with around 20 till 30,000. Hold on a minute, let me see. Oh, the background's changed. Never mind. So you had 20 to 30,000 soldiers over here, which was only about, well, roughly maybe 18 hours distance from you. So you would have felt safe. Nothing went wrong. But if you would have lived, let me give another example. If you would have lived, for example, all the way over here, the closest military camp was about 2 days away. And so the response time would be around 4 days or maybe a week. So how are you going to convince people over here And there's only one legionary camp over here of 10 to 15,000 people for a region of probably 3 to 4 million people, roughly. How are you going to do that? Well, first of all, what Rome did was they forced many young men from every one of those regions to join the military. There were also people from the, how do I say it, the client provinces that joined the military. But now you may ask, why did they divide it into? Why not just make everything a direct province under the emperor? First of all, it's a big region to manage. It will cost a lot of money also. And you need to understand, by having this divide between the so-called barbaric regions and the civilized regions, and us versus them, that's duality. The people that lived around the Mediterranean, they felt safe because in their mind there was a barbaric world out here with a lot of terrorists and dangerous people that wanted to harm the peace and economic equilibrium that was here in the civilized world. So that's why a lot of people felt at home with Rome, despite the brutality of the Roman military complex. That's also what also motivated a lot of young men from all these regions to join the military. And that's why they built all these military camps over here to basically to a border, because as mentioned before, there were these were client provinces. Those kings and elites were also Roman citizens, so they played the game along. And from time to time, they would send out some groups of bandits to attack people over here, or the Roman military would do it themselves, and people would blame the barbarians. So now the army had to fight again. It's also military because there's a so-called military threat, even though the threat is non-existent. You need to make shields, you need to make swords, so that it's also to boost the economy. Anyway, this system was quite dominant and effective. It provided people of fresh water, hygiene, and a lot of other benefits. Now, I'm not in agreement with the gods they worshipped and all that other stuff, but the reason I'm pointing this out to you because now I'm going to shift to this kingdom over here. Let me see how long I've been recording. Let me see, I hope I'm not, 12 minutes. Okay. This is the Angevin kingdom, or Angevin Empire, as I say it in English. Well, I'm going to give the brief history of this. Hold on, let me go to Google Maps. Okay, let me. By the way, don't be bothered by the Brexit stuff, guys. There's also some rigged thing that's going on, but I'll talk about that in another video, maybe. Okay. Remember, the Principate was all the way from this region, including this over here. So that's all large empire. But the Angevin Empire, let me make it a satellite thing. Okay, the Angevin Empire was basically England with Wales, parts of Ireland, or better said the whole island, because Ireland was economically dependent upon England, and France, joined together under one king, who was both the King of England and the King of France at the same time. Now what happened was, this over here was split in two in the 4th century, and in the 5th century the western structure fell apart, and it became a mess over here for a long time. Let me say the 7th century you had the rise of, and short of the Muhammad's death, you had an Islamic empire that emerged very quickly at the expense of what was left of the Roman empire. And today, there are these so-called threats of extremists, so-called Muslim extremists that blow themselves up in terrorist attacks. Now, during the early Middle Ages, you had a series of attacks from the Middle East upon Europe. They would just arrive in sail ships, pretending to be traders, and once they were in a town, they would begin to massacre people. And you would have people, converts from these regions, who also adopted Muhammad's religion, and they would begin to commit atrocities. And within 100 years after Muhammad's death, they basically invaded Spain. So Spain became part of the caliphate. Now, and I mean, these were a series of attacks. I mean, every 6 months there would be many attacks throughout Europe, throughout what was left of the classic civilizations. So people in Europe became quite afraid. It was growing and growing. So, and there was France became, in ancient times were called Gaul. France became, became a part of the caliphate for about a year, until some of the German farmers joined in, they joined into an army and they drove out the caliphate rulers from France. So France became what they called Christian territory again. Well, it was basically more Catholic, but you get the idea. So what happened was, many of the people that lived in England at the time, because during the time that the caliphate was emerging, you had all these small kingdoms that were fighting each other over here, and you had the Norwegian Empire that were also resisting the caliphate. But later on, England was reunited again, and at the time, the people here were quite scared of the caliphate, also because Spain became a stronghold, a very important and wealthy stronghold of the caliphate. And they were not in France at the time, but the people in Britain, they thought it's only a matter of time before they were here. So what did the rulers of England do? They, in agreement with many refugees from France, they joined the marine forces to keep the caliphate out. And this region over here, which during the Roman times it was called Narbonensis, but during the Middle Ages it was called the County of Toulouse. Toulouse is the French version of Tolosa. In Italian it's still called Tolosa, but this is a side fact over here. The people that lived over there, they were under constant military attacks from the caliphate. So the elite in London, they arranged military support for this region, and many of the local rich people over here, they joined the King of England, and this whole region became part of the English Empire at the time. Also this region, but it didn't take long before there were rebels against the English dominance. So you had one guy over here who called himself the King of France, even though he practically only had the region around Paris, this yellow region over here, and you had many claims he had in the environment, also parts of what they call the Netherlands and Belgium. But nevertheless, practically the most of France was English territory together with Ireland, and they call it the Angevin Empire. Well, what does this have to do with what I've said in my previous video? Well, look, I mentioned before that principalities, when it comes to the human level, are ideas that people accept without questioning, and the powers are the emotional. The powers are the emotional change that chain people into holding on to those ideas. And those things together form an equilibrium, which we call the status quo or society. So, apart from the Roman time, after the western part of Rome collapsed, there was no homogeneity more in the world. There was chaos throughout the world also, but that lasted for centuries. And in the Middle Ages, you also had the caliphate that threatened Europe, especially Italy and the Mediterranean. There were many people being kidnapped from Europe and sent as sex slaves to the caliphate. You also had many, many famines because food supplies were being stolen from cargo ships around here. Because you used to have a load of grain and olive oil and fruits coming from the Middle East and Northern Africa to Europe. That didn't happen anymore. Well, so at the time the Angevin Empire emerged, there was fear, there was terror in that hangers of medieval France, also in the Rhine region and Britain and Ireland. And the elite that governed London, they understood very well that when people are afraid, they tend to accept things they normally would not accept. So they took advantage of it and they established their country, which was England, Ireland, and France together, separated in two kingdoms, the Kingdom of England and the Kingdom of France. And the whole principle behind this was, there is an Islamic invasion going on. We, as the Christian people who serve the Most High God, we need to defend ourselves against those people. And the fact was there was military danger. Okay? But, as I mentioned before, Satan tends to reveal true facts, and Satan can reveal 7 facts to you, but he may present them in a way that will suggest an outcome that ain't true. Or he may say 6 things are true and 1 thing that's a lie, but because he says them in an order and he hides the lie between the 6 facts, so you will think you're hearing 7 facts, but you're only hearing 6 facts and 1 lie. But because the lie is hidden within the facts, you think it's all true. So the rulers established the Angevin Empire at the expense of the French people and also of the Irish people. The system, when you research it, guys, they didn't even have a capital. I'm serious about this. They did not even have a capital. Yet London, it was the capital of the Kingdom of England. And Paris was the capital of France, but, well, you had a rival over there. And you also had terrorist attacks from the rivals on the English dominions, the other way around also. So there was no real structure in it. And you need to remember, this was long after the fall of the Roman Principate and Dominant. So the road system that was effective for horses and trade throughout Europe, it did not exist anymore. So during Rome's time, to go from London to Paris would take about maybe 1 day and a half, or from here all the way to here may have taken about 4 days, but now it may have taken more a week or 2. So the distances were, because not all the roads were maintained well. You can't maintain the roads well if you have rivals fighting for the same territory and also attacking one another from time to time. This also causes stress and confusion in the population. But anyway, the principality, because there is a threat, the Kingdom of England is anointed, is wise. London is an effective structure, so London deserves the dominance of France. And you have the emotional attachment people had because people want to feel safe. So whatever was effective, they accepted. So you had the principality and the power together that manifests as the Angevin Empire. But here's the catch, guys. Because people were stuck at the mental equilibrium, they thought it was effective while it was not. Because most of the money went to fending off jihadi terrorists in the south. So much of the money, silver and gold, went to pay off troops over here. And because of that, it was mostly the blacksmiths and people that provided for the navy or the military that became wealthy over here. So there was a lot of poverty also in Ireland. Ireland was also exploited. Total Ireland being dependent upon sailing through England, via England, to trade with other regions. And there's another catch. The population of England was not that high. Okay, let me go deeper into this. There were not that many towns, okay? You still have the Roman towns, for example, Eboracum, which was called York. Eboracum became Yoricum, then Yorcum, York. I'm not going to explain the whole evolution of the Latin names or the Greek Latin names into the English names. You can research that for yourself if you want. You didn't have many towns. Some of the Roman towns were even destroyed. You could have had, maybe there were around 3 million people in England. I'm just guessing here, okay? So I'm going to admit I'm guessing maybe 3 million people over here. Maybe there were around 6 million over here. 1 million over here, so that will be about 14 million people in this region. There may be 2 million over here also. So the most of the people of the Angevin Empire lived in France, which was also a divided region. So the King of England, who was also King of France, had to compete all the time, and most of the attention went to France at the expense of the regions over here. So that caused for trouble, and the population that benefited the most still were the people living in Ireland and here when it came to safety. Why? Because, well, the caliphate remained over here, but that was the only objective benefit. Because, as mentioned before, the economic center became over here, so France became more wealthy than England. So it took a while before this principality was broken. It was around after the reign of the Tudors in England that really this thing began to collapse. And it was when Louis XIV of France became king of France. Was in the 17th century that France truly became France with no English claims on it anymore. That's why Louis XIV. Okay, let me look it up for you. That's why it is praised as the French king. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. No excuses. I am this bit disoriented right now. Well, it was a busy day. I wrote 16th wrong, 14th wrong. Louis XIV, I mean. He is seen as the French king that established France. He built Versailles, also the big palace. And most of what they call French culture developed during the time of that man. So because before that, it was still the leftovers of the Angevin Empire that was really collapsing. But the power was still there, but the power was broken throughout several generations. And the Angevin Empire remained for about a few hundred years. I believe about 500 years, I think it lasted before it became the United Kingdom, which today, after about 400 years, 450 years, now also collapsing, kind of. Well, why am I mentioning all of this? Powers and principalities and powers, they manifest, as I mentioned before, as a mental equilibrium, which we call society, which involves religion and politics and all of that. So, to illustrate that to you, I want to illustrate that people can be stuck into something that's highly ineffective and non-beneficial onto them, but they cannot see it. Why? Because they're blind. Because as I mentioned before, the principalities and powers can only operate in darkness. Okay? The more the people here became aware of their own wealth, the emotional, the principality it was exposed, so it was disarmed, and little by little the emotional attachment, stronghold, emotional bond weakened, and France later became France. Now, I'm not saying that to praise what happened lately, because the later French nation was also established through scapegoating and all of that crap. But I just want to point out to you that when you are a believer, because Jesus said that his kingdom is not from this world, understand that the countries you see today are the result of of centuries of bloodshed and all of that. And let me tell you, most of the countries you see today are the same. Let me say the same countries of doing the Roman Principate, but their borders are slightly different, and they have other names. Well, many of the names are still derived from, the Greek-Roman names of the time. For Austria is still now in existence. Helvetia, today Switzerland. Hibernia is Ireland. Baetica today is a part of Spain called Andalusia. Lusitania is today Portugal, and a part of it belongs to the Kingdom of Spain. You can go on and on. Well, this video has endured far longer than I intended, more than a half hour. But I just want to use historical analysis to point out to you that powers and principalities, they may have various manifestations through time. In this case, you had the Angevin Empire, and I'm not demonizing what happened over here, because there were beautiful stuff that also happened. You had the gospel being spread through this time. We had people here that were poor that their poverty was alleviated by this. So believers during these times were a blessing. They managed to exploit what was going on. That's what believers always do. They exploit the oppression and persecution against them, and it's turned around for the good, for the glory of for the glory of the Father. So that also happens during this. So this structure was permitted by the Heavenly Father to remain for a while, and during the time that this existed, the believers were exploiting. Because listen, believers were persecuted heavily also during this time. If you had the Bible in your house, man, you were in trouble. That church in Rome, with that papal ruler, you were in trouble if you had the Bible. But nevertheless, believers were active. The gospel was being spread, and the kingdom of God was growing also. People were healed, demons cast out. So there were good things happening, but not because of this structure, despite of it. Well, so believers don't really need to pick up physical arms and overthrow the elite and all of that. Just be in agreement with Christ, okay? Be in agreement with Christ. Where you are now, the Most High has permitted you to be there. He could have removed you far away from that place where you are now, but He has, in His grace, He has permitted you to be there. So exploit through faith, exploit wherever you are for His glory. And when Jesus returns, we're going to meet many of the saints from both medieval England and medieval France, of both sides, that lived, and they're going to tell us what they've witnessed, and their testimony is going to be with us forever. Well, that being said, y'all, that's what I wanted to say in this recording. I'm sorry that I've spoken as long as this, but history is one of my passions, so when I'm talking about history, I can go on and on. But I want to keep it to the point. Believers, be in agreement with Christ and do exploits for His glory. It will last forever. The Angevin Empire, it collapsed a long time ago, as it should. It was a joke, literally. I mean, this The Principate was more real than the Angevin Empire, but nevertheless, more of such jokes had happened throughout history. There are some of those jokes still here. They're going to disappear, but the heritage of the Lord will remain forever. That being said, you all enjoy the Shabbat and be at peace.